I kind of realized that I didn't know a lot about the religion. Well, my family, they reacted pretty well to it at first. You know, if you feel like there's a little pocket of it that you're not necessarily connecting with, there are other parts of it that you will connect with. Well, it was the pandemic in 2020. It was like the first wave. And I think I sort of noticed at a certain point that I was dealing with what I identified as a spiritual crisis. And I wanted to learn more about how to get closer to God, you know? I kind of realized that I didn't know a lot about the religion. So I sort of felt like I had some making up to do in terms of just understanding it. And it became pretty obvious at a certain point that if I wanted to get closer to God, this would be an excellent way to do it, if not the very best. So that's kind of what sparked the interest. Well, that's kind of what's funny about it, is because I've grown up in Toronto, Ontario, so it's a very multicultural place. So relatively, there's a pretty big Muslim population. But even though I've kind of been around Muslims basically my whole life, you know, it's almost like we've kind of been like ships in the night passing by each other, and I've just never really looked deeper. So that's kind of the funny thing about my story, is that it sort of felt like it was under my nose the whole time. And I was 38 years old when I converted, so I was pretty old relatively. But then eventually, you know, it was just Allah's way that circumstances came about in just such a way that all of a sudden it was kind of right in front of me, you know? So, you know, alhamdulillah, it's like a funny thing that way. Yeah, so because it was during the pandemic, it was kind of funny because all the masajid were closed down, and during like the first wave of COVID too. So when you remember like the first lockdowns, everything was pretty locked down, you know? And a lot of the masajid opened up kind of sooner than the churches and other things did. They were like pretty soon to reopen, but nevertheless, when I was really trying to learn about the religion, they were still all shut down. So what happened was I ended up writing an email to 3 different masajid, and I said kind of the same thing in each email. I said, I'm interested in learning more about Islam. Do you know when the mosque is going to reopen, and can I come learn about it? 2 of them didn't write back to me at all. I didn't get any response from 2 of them. And then the third one, they said, I don't know when we're gonna reopen, but we are meeting by Zoom every Friday. And it's open to everybody, it's open to all types of Muslims, and it's open to non-Muslims as well. And that phrase especially, that it was open to non-Muslims, was kind of a game changer for me, because I felt like I could just show up and just learn. So there was probably about a 4 or maybe even longer, maybe even up to 6-month period of me just doing that, of just showing up every Friday and just learning. And then through the week I would be reading my own books and doing my own learning as well. So there was a long time for me where I was just kind of soaking up the knowledge and soaking up the information. Well, my family, they reacted pretty well to it at first. They weren't negative outwardly in any particular way. Most of my family, all my immediate family, let's say, the ones who reacted negatively didn't tell me about it, you know? So if anything, it just became okay with some people and then kind of awkward and quiet with the rest. And then with my friends, a lot of them sort of saw it coming because it was a while coming, like there was a fair bit of a lead up to it. So a lot of them kind of saw it coming. It was more of a process. And it was a process that continued after I gave Shahada as well. It's a process that continues to this day. But I think, again, because it was the pandemic, a lot of my friends probably found out online. Like eventually I made this post about it on my Instagram stories. I was like, this is what's up. Like, I'm Muslim now, you know? So it wasn't like, just because again, the pandemic was just that we were all kind of isolated a little bit, and there was just a lot more online engagement than real life engagement at that time. And so I think a lot of people probably found out about it that way before So it probably saved me a lot of awkward conversations, to be completely honest with you, because I didn't have to sort of sit somebody down and be like, we've been friends for a while, just so you know I'm Muslim now, because they already knew, you know, by the time I saw them. So, but it's been good, alhamdulillah, you know, like no one's been, I think the problem is that if anybody has a negative feeling about it, they're not going to tell me, right? So whoever got turned away from that, I don't even know. But I will say that the overwhelming majority of people who I'm close to, we have talked about it and they've been supportive of it, so that's cool. One of the last hesitations that I had before I gave Shahada, because I wanted to be really sure about it, and I was, you know, I really wanted to take my time learning about the religion, and one of my last hesitations was the 5 daily prayers, because I'm somebody who already kind of struggles with like shame and guilt and being just really, really hard on myself. Like anybody who knows me would tell you that. So I thought, what's the point of doing this when I'm gonna kind of commit to doing these prayers and then I'm gonna start missing them and then I'm just gonna feel bad about myself. It's just like I'm setting myself up to fail, you know? And there was one week where it was like the last wall to fall down almost. It was like the one thing that was holding me back. And wouldn't you know it, the khutbah on that Friday at the end of that week was all about the 5 daily prayers and all about how, you know, they're not like for Allah's well-being. He's gonna be fine. The prayers are for us. And if we miss them, the world doesn't stop turning, but we're the ones who lose out. They're for our benefit, and we benefit when we make all 5. And I kind of got to this point of thinking, you know, if I make 3 and I miss 2, at least I got those 3. And so it built my faith because, you know, it was part of a pattern. And I could describe many other incidents like that, where it's like, I had some kind of problem or some kind of challenge, and then wouldn't you know it, I walk around the next corner and Allah has kind of created this solution or answered that curiosity. So things like that have kind of really built my faith along the way, because it just sort of seems like, it feels like Allah's been guiding me for a lot of it, alhamdulillah. Again, I think one of the things in the very beginning that I just kind of couldn't believe was just how ignorant about it I was. Like living in such a multicultural city, I actually felt quite embarrassed about how little I knew about a lot of the core tenets of the religion, considering that we have a lot of Muslims in this city. So there was a lot of evolution of my understanding of Islamic concepts pretty quickly, because I was just learning so much about stuff that I was just completely ignorant about. But then one thing that I think is, you know, kind of interesting is that even, you know, there's a lot of focus on the time that led up to the Shahada. But even since the Shahada, there's been a lot more learning. So at this point, it's like maybe there was a 6-7 month period leading up to me giving Shahada when I started learning about the religion. Now I'm coming up to almost 4 years since I gave Shahada. So really, there's been a lot more time since the Shahada that I've been learning about Islam. You know, the more I learn about the Quran, the more I study Hadith, the more I study like amazing Sahaba stories, like there's just, the learning keeps going and going and going and going, right? You know what I learned from it's like almost a cliche that I hear people say, and you see it in pamphlets on Islam and stuff, is like, Islam is not a religion, it's a way of life. Like a lot of people say that. And in Turkey, I kind of experienced that a little bit, because, you know, you hear the adhan playing out loud, right? And there's mosques everywhere. So you don't have to necessarily plan, where am I gonna be when it's Asr today, I'm gonna pray. You can just be walking around, you hear the adhan, you go into the mosque and you pray. And everywhere you go, you see people with the tasbih, like in the street, you know, it's kind of ubiquitous. So for me, it really showed me a way of living with the religion that was less focused on, you know, being a Muslim and having all of the issues that come with that, in terms of like hanging out with my non-Muslim family and friends or meeting other new Muslims. When did you become a Muslim? And focus less on the identity side of things, and focus just a lot more on just like the doing of Islam and the living Islam and the prayer and the remembrance of Allah, and you know, being in a place, like where I was in Istanbul, it's pretty secularized, depending especially on what part of the city you're in and who you're around. But in terms of having these, this aspect of life available to you, by my standards, is pretty incredible. One of the kind of proverbs that somebody shared with me was start and keep going. That's it. In a way, it's pretty simple. Some days are going to be easy, some days are going to be hard, some days you're going to feel lost, some days you're going to maybe feel like you got to figure it out, inshallah, but just keep going, keep going, keep going, and try to remember how big this world really is. And if you feel like there's a little pocket of it that you're not necessarily connecting with, there are other parts of it that you will connect with. For a lot of converts, for me, like I've kind of felt like a weirdo at times, like I've kind of felt like a little bit of an outsider at times. So if anybody feels like that, I would say just keep going, because you'll find other people who are weird like you. And it's just such a huge ummah, such a huge religion, and there's sort of something for everybody. And you're on this path for a reason, right? So trust it and keep going and enjoy it. That's my advice, really. I would say enjoy it. The learning never stops and the growing never stops. But when you're first interested in Islam, or you're first becoming Muslim, or even when your heart is just first opening up to it as a world of beauty, that's something that's beautiful and a world of richness to you, that's a beautiful time. That's a really beautiful time. So just relish every minute of it. Yeah, that's a beautiful hadith, and Allah calls who He wills, right? So if you're feeling the pull of it, it's probably because you're hearing the call. So alhamdulillah, it's a beautiful thing. It's quite a blessing to even have your heart open to it, let alone you keep learning about it, you keep growing, and it transforms you. And that's another thing I would say is, like, I think when you're a new Muslim, even though if you get good counsel, the counsel will be to take it slow and take it easy and take things as you can, and don't overwhelm yourself with the religion. There's some good hadith about that as well. But I would say just to really trust this process. One metaphor that I keep coming back to is like I showed up on the beach as like this jagged stone, and over time the waves keep crashing, and by you get polished into almost like a gleaming marble, And so this is the effect of Islam, is that if you just keep going, give it a good effort, do your best, and have a good intention, it will improve you, and it will nourish you, and it will make you a better person. And pretty soon you'll look back and it's almost like magic that it's just blessed you in so many different ways. I keep coming back to it, you know what I mean? Because it's just like the easiest way to express this idea. And that's been true in my life. And some days are high, some days are low. It's like a real zigzag. It's not always easy. But then when you zoom out and look back on it, you see this very clear trend that you're becoming better. You're becoming more patient. You're becoming happier. You're becoming more content. You're becoming more chill. You're becoming better to be around, Yeah, so Reverts Connect is a beautiful group of revert Muslims. We are trying to build a supportive and kind of nurturing collective that is really welcoming and helpful to new Muslims. Anything we can do to help, by all means, get involved and get in touch with us, and sometimes as a new Muslim, one thing that can be missing in some situations is community, right? So anything that really fills that gap and really supplies that is always a good thing. Always good to connect with other brothers and sisters and just know that you're not alone, and just know that there's support there for you. So I hope you embrace it, inshallah, and connect.
Okay, I guess for last thing, is there anything else you want to say to the audience?
Anything else I want to say? Do I want to say anything else? Should I say anything about Reverts Connect?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, tell us about Reverts Connect. Yeah, we'll ask them. We'll ask them.
Yeah,
Ask the question.